Right now, as you watch this, two crises are converging that could reshape the balance of global power for the next 50 years, and almost nobody is connecting them. I want you to stop whatever you are doing, because if you miss what I am about to tell you, you will not understand a single headline you read for the next 6 months. My research, drawing on verified reports, documented statements, and analysis from leading geopolitical institutions, suggests we are watching a historic inflection point unfold in real time. Donald Trump just flew home from Beijing. He shook hands with Professor Lin. He called the trip very successful. He talked about fantastic trade deals. And yet, the single thing America needed most from that summit, guaranteed long-term access to rare earth minerals, China did not give him, not even close. At the same moment, the war with Iran is still smoldering. The Strait of Hormuz remains a battlefield of brinkmanship, and the alliance between Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, the partnership that launched the most consequential military operation in the modern Middle East, is cracking right down the middle. This is the biggest geopolitical story of the year, and it is happening right now. Let us start with what just happened in Beijing, because the gap between what Trump said and what actually occurred is staggering. Trump arrived in China on May 14, 2026, for a two-day summit with President Xi Jinping. He brought with him some of the most powerful corporate names in America: Elon Musk, Tim Cook of Apple, Jensen Huang of Nvidia, a delegation designed to signal that this was serious business. And the optics were extraordinary. There were flags, ceremony, warm words exchanged in the Great Hall of the Trump called Xi a great leader. Xi welcomed deeper commercial engagement. But beneath all of that theater, the most urgent item on the American agenda went unresolved: rare earth minerals. Here is why this matters so much that it cannot be overstated. China controls approximately 90% of global rare earth refining and processing capacity. It controls more than 60% of the world's mine supply. These are not obscure rocks. Rare earths are the 17 metallic elements that go inside your smartphone, your electric vehicle, your fighter jet, and the precision-guided munitions that the United States military has been burning through at an alarming rate. Since February 2026, the F-35 fighter jet requires rare earth materials. American missile systems require rare earth materials. And right now, with an active military confrontation with Iran ongoing, the United States Department of Defense has been depleting those very weapons at a rate that has sent national security analysts into alarm. As the Council on Foreign Relations senior fellow Heidi Kribo-Rediker wrote in an analysis published just days before the summit, the center of gravity in this trade war has shifted dramatically. It is no longer primarily about tariffs. It is now about China's control over critical minerals and the magnet supply chains that underpin modern military capability and advanced manufacturing. So when Trump walked into Beijing, he was walking in with a profound vulnerability. And Xi Jinping knew it. This is what my research suggests distinguishes the summit from all the previous ones. America arrived needing something it cannot replicate quickly, and China arrived knowing it could simply wait. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the United States currently has zero heavy rare earth separation capacity on its own soil. Not limited capacity, zero. Even with all of Trump's executive orders, his Defense Production Act invocations, his mineral agreements with Australia, Japan, Malaysia, Thailand, and Cambodia signed just before the Beijing summit, experts say it will take between 5 and 10 years before America can meaningfully reduce its dependence on China for these materials. You cannot build a mine in a new cycle. You cannot construct a rare earth refinery during a presidential term. And Xi Jinping is playing by a fundamentally different clock than Donald Trump. The result of the Beijing summit was exactly what that asymmetry predicted. Trump left without a concrete rare earth agreement. The Chinese statement did not even mention rare earths. The White House, in its own readout published after the summit, said China would address rare earth shortages, a phrase so vague it means almost nothing. The one-year trade truce that Beijing and Washington agreed to in Busan, South Korea last October, the truce that has kept rare earth export licenses nominally flowing, expires in the fall. And as of this moment, no binding extension has been secured. The best-case scenario, according to Redeker herself, is merely an extension of that existing and temporary arrangement. She said plainly, the United States and its allies cannot outmine, outprocess, or outspend China quickly enough to rebuild resilience in the near term. Trump called the summit very successful. A geopolitical advisor at the Bespoke Group called it underwhelming on live television the morning after. There were symbolic wins. China agreed to buy at least $17 billion of American agricultural goods annually through 2028. Beijing will purchase 200 Boeing aircraft. A framework for technology discussions was mentioned. But here's what the Financial Times reported after Xi and Trump concluded their meetings. Xi conceded little, and their discussions yielded no clear breakthroughs on the big foreign policy and economic fissures between the two countries. The New York Times described the moment when she arrived at every turn highly scripted, projecting the image of China as a peer superpower. And as one analysis put it bluntly, Trump arrived in Beijing in a position of weakness, and he left in no stronger position. If anything, he reinforced an equilibrium that elevated his rival. Now, let us turn to the second crisis because it is directly connected. Since February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel have been at war with Iran. Operation Epic Fury, the coordinated airstrike campaign launched jointly by Washington and Tel Aviv, struck Iranian military facilities, nuclear sites, and killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Iran responded with massive missile and drone barrages against Israeli cities and American military bases across the Gulf, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain. Iran then closed the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which roughly 1/5 of the world's seaborne oil supply normally passes. The economic shock was immediate. Oil prices surged, global shipping rerouted. Insurance premiums for any vessel near the strait exploded. Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest in the world, was damaged by drone strikes and partially shut down. Schools across the Gulf shifted to remote learning. Flights across the entire Middle East came to a near-complete halt. After weeks of devastating strikes, a ceasefire was brokered through Pakistan on April 7th and 8th. But here is where the story gets deeply complicated, and where the Trump-Netanyahu alliance began to publicly fracture. Because the ceasefire that Trump announced did not mean the same thing everyone. Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif announced that the ceasefire covered all fronts, including Lebanon, including Israel's ongoing military campaign against Hezbollah. Netanyahu immediately rejected that framing. He said the ceasefire does not apply to Lebanon. He said Israel will continue striking any threat. He said publicly that the war is not over as long as Iran retains highly enriched uranium and active enrichment facilities. Just hours after Trump announced the ceasefire, Israeli forces launched their biggest attack of the Lebanon invasion. Iran accused Israel of violating the truce. Trump had to call Netanyahu personally and reportedly pressure him to scale back the operation. According to Bloomberg, it was that call, Trump telling Netanyahu to stand down, that has become one of the most revealing moments of the rupture between them. The fault lines run deeper than a single phone call. According to Bloomberg's detailed reporting, Netanyahu lobbied Trump for years to strike Iran. Israeli intelligence was cited as a decisive factor in Trump authorizing Operation Epic Fury. In that sense, Netanyahu got what he wanted. But now that Trump is trying to extricate the United States from the conflict, negotiate a settlement, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and reduce the economic damage from surging oil prices, Netanyahu keeps pulling in the opposite direction. Netanyahu told CBS's 60 Minutes that there is more work to be done. He said the ceasefire is a stop on the way to achieving all of our objectives. He said diplomacy would be the first step, but he explicitly did not rule out removing Iran's uranium stockpile by force. He publicly insisted that Lebanon must be kept separate from any Iran ceasefire deal, while Iran insists the opposite, that any peace must cover all fronts simultaneously. In my assessment, what we are watching is two leaders who are on the first chapter of the war, but profoundly divided on how and when the war must end. Trump's priority is stabilization. He wants calmer oil markets. He wants to reduce the economic and political pressure that the Hormuz crisis has created domestically. He wants to go to Beijing looking like a leader who has the Middle East under control. He wants a deal with Iran that does not make America look like it lost. Netanyahu's priority is elimination. He wants Iran's nuclear program permanently destroyed. He wants Hezbollah dismantled. He wants the Iranian regime changed or minimum permanently defanged. On CBS, Netanyahu has said plainly that regime change in Iran is possible, not guaranteed but possible. He said there are still enrichment sites to be dismantled, still enriched uranium to be removed, still proxy forces to be neutralized, still ballistic missiles to address. His definition of victory requires conditions that make any quick peace deal essentially impossible. And that gap is now an open wound in what was once the most celebrated geopolitical bromance of the Trump era. The ceasefire, fragile as it is, keeps being tested. On May 7th, the United States military carried out fresh strikes on Iranian facilities after Iran launched missile, drone, and small boat attacks on American warships transiting the Strait of Hormuz. Trump called the American response a love tap. He warned Iran's clock is ticking. On May 17th, just before Trump flew to Beijing, he warned that there won't be anything left of them if Iran does not act soon. Reports from Axios indicate that Trump was scheduled to meet with National Security Advisor on May 19th to discuss potential military action against Iran. The Strait of Hormuz remains, as of this moment, a contested zone. Iran has not fully reopened it. The United States Navy is conducting a naval blockade of Iranian ports. Iran calls it a dual blockade. The world calls it one of the most dangerous maritime standoffs in modern history. Now bring both crises back together because this is the real picture that the individual headlines will not give you. Trump went to Beijing carrying the weight of an unresolved war. He needed China to help pressure Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. What he got from Xi was described by one Western official as a vague commitment. China called for reopening the strait. It said all the right diplomatic words, but Beijing and Moscow have both vetoed United Nations Security Council resolutions that would have applied real pressure. China is Iran's largest oil buyer. China has every economic incentive to manage the Hormuz situation on its own timeline, not Washington's. And the reason rare earths and the Iran war are the same story is this. America is burning through precision munitions built with rare earth materials faster than it can replenish them in a war it launched partly on the basis of Israeli intelligence lobbying. I guess a country whose most powerful remaining weapon is a waterway that China needs open just as much as anyone, giving Beijing extraordinary leverage over the outcome of this entire conflict. So what comes next for both leaders? For Trump, the path forward is narrowing. The trade truce with China expires in the fall. The Iran ceasefire is being violated in slow motion. Netanyahu is publicly undermining the peace process he needs to close the Hormuz crisis. Domestically, oil prices and gasoline costs are real and growing political burden. His Beijing trip produced warm photographs and vague agricultural commitments, but no structural solution to America's rare earth dependency. And here is a strategic irony that experts at Chatham House have identified. Against the United States system that operates in news cycles and swings between elections, even modest long-term discipline from China is advantageous. Beijing is using this time to build. If Washington fails to match that with coherent execution, America enters every future Trump-Xi meeting in a weaker position than the last. For Netanyahu, the political calculus is equally precarious. He's fighting a war on multiple fronts: Iran, Lebanon, Gaza, with an American partner who is increasingly trying to wind things down. A 63% majority of Israeli citizens, according to a Hebrew University poll taken in April, believe the ceasefire should not extend to Lebanon. But Israel's ability to sustain this campaign depends on continued American weapons support. And that support is not unconditional. A Trump who is embarrassed, under economic pressure, and denied his Beijing breakthrough is a Trump who may be less willing to absorb Israeli escalation that complicates his diplomatic objectives. The moment that call came, Trump pressured Netanyahu to scale back Lebanon strikes, was the moment the relationship publicly showed it is an alliance of shared interest, not unconditional loyalty. And those interests are beginning to diverge. If you have been paying attention to every single headline and still feel confused about why the world feels like it is accelerating towards something enormous, this is why. The rare earth crisis, the Iran war, the Beijing summit, the Netanyahu relationship, the Hormuz standoff, these are not separate stories. They are one story, and it is not over. Subscribe to this channel right now because I am tracking every development as it happens. Leave a comment, tell me which part of this story concerns you most. Share this with one person in your life who needs to understand what is actually happening. The next few weeks will be decisive. Do not miss them. This video is based on publicly available reporting, documented political events, and analysis from credible institutions including the Council on Foreign Relations, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Chatham House, the Financial Times, Bloomberg, CNN, the New York Times, CNBC, and Wikipedia's continuously updated conflict records. Some analysis and assessments represent my interpretation of verified information and should be understood as informed commentary, not established fact.